Hello everybody, my name's Scott Collier. I am the developer and creator of Chaos Rising, the pen and paper, old school Renaissance style game. And today I'm going to talk about doors. So, doors in a delve or dungeon setting, in sort of old school terms, people just think the door is a door. However, in Chaos Rising, what doors are basically a resource drain, which main resource drain is the time. It provides an information barrier. It's also a noise generator or a chaos generator. It also controls movement throughout the dungeon. I know last week I showed you a dungeon map and how doors appeared on that map. So effectively what we're going to do is cover how to generate doors. We're going to look at what's called the probability space. That's going to be a term I'm going to keep referring to as we go through these videos. We're going to look at how to identify doors, how to resolve them, and how to trigger the effects of doors. So, the probability space. What is the probability space? So, when you're in a dungeon and you walk up to a door, by looking at the door without any sort of serious investigation, you're not going to know the state of the door other than it's a door. So the status is going to be unknown. It's going to be a question mark until you actually do something with that door. Now, for example, let's say that the door could be in one of three states: open, trapped, or locked. There are 8 states in Chaos Rising, but let's just take 3. So it could, just by looking at the door, it could either be unlocked and open, it could have a trap on it, or it could be locked. Now, you won't know, and the player won't know, what that door is until you try something. So what are the things you can try? So you can do an action called examine the door or check the door. And then what you would do is you would make a test on your sort of search skill, and then you would roll to find out what actually the door state was. So in this instance, for example, if you've got you're in area 1 and you make a check the door and want to know what it is, you want to know if it's open, if it's trapped, or if it's locked, you make your roll, and if you're successful, you will find out what state the door's in. So for example, I roll a 2 on a 1d3 and it works out that it's trapped. So we put the door state and put it as trapped. Okay. We've got we'll come back to that later. But you could also roll the same dice and it could come up with open. So that's what's known as the probability space. Probability space is something that something could be, you just don't know what it is. And a lot of the things in Chaos Rising are to do, a lot of the discovery in Chaos Rising is about the probability space. The player won't know what they are until they do something to check what it is. So that's one action, checking the door. But perhaps, as we've stated previous, it's a resource drain. I don't want to spend the time it takes to check the door because I'm running out of light, or I'm running out of endurance, or I've only got so many items left. So what I decided to do, I decided to go through the door without checking. But the chance for it to be open, trapped, and locked is still the same. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a risk. I'm trading time for risk. I know there's a 2 in 3 chance of getting that door being trapped, but I'm going to try it anyway. So in this instance, the door state would be that I don't know what it is. I make a move. I then would have to roll on the same probability space, 1, 2, or 3, to find out what state the door is in. And if, for example, I roll a 2, which means it will be trapped, I would generate the trap on the door and that trap then would be activated automatically straight away, and I would suffer the effects of the trap on the door. So what you basically the check door does is provide information on the door so that when you try and go through it, you already know what it is and you're avoiding the trap or the possible trap. Okay. So that would be for trap. So say, for example, I've got a door that's locked. Tried to move through, but it's locked. I can't move through it until I unlock it. So what I have to do, you would take either a pick lock action or a force door action. You would roll to pick the lock, and then all you would do when successful, or if successful, you would turn that door state to open. And that's it. And then what you would do is you could only leave an area through a door that has the open state. Any other state, you wouldn't be able to leave the area through that door. If it was trapped, so we have another one that's trapped, you would do the disarm trap action, and you would, if you're successful, you would then put that as open again. Therefore, you could leave that door through that area through that open door. Pretty simple. And that is basically how you would then work in the probability space. Instead of like most games of this type, you just roll and it will tell you if it's trapped or not when you enter a room. When you enter a room, automatically the door is set to unknown because you don't know. And that would be the same in real life. If you come back to your house and see the door, you don't know. You've got a good chance that it's locked, but it may be open. Or if the landlord has decided to get you, you're probably trapped. So what would happen then, for example, if you wanted to listen at the door? So as we said earlier, doors are an information barrier. So I've rolled the door, I've checked it, and it works out that it's locked. Okay. Now, do I want to waste the time and resources trying to unlock this door, not knowing what is going to be on the area past the door? So one of the actions that you can take is listen at the door. And what that does, again, it works on the probability space of the next area's contents and what it could be. So what you would do is you would do the listen at door action of a door that's locked or closed or any of the door states. And then that would give you an indication as to the type and the contents of the next room before you even got in there. So that's basically we're breaking down that information barrier. So let's say I make a listen at doors roll and I'm successful. But what I can do is generate the type of room that it will be. So in this instance, I may roll and it's a chamber. So I know area one's going to be a chamber. And then I'll roll to determine the overarching type of the contents. And I'll know it's an encounter of some description. So I don't know what kind of encounter it is. I only know beyond that door there's a chamber and there's an encounter. And then by doing that, I have wasted some resources, but I've got impertinent information. Now the question is, do I want to then see what that encounter is, or do I just want to ignore that locked door and carry on? So that is how the probability space works with listen at doors, which you don't usually find in these type of games. Usually that's not even a thing where you can use the probability space to determine and use doors to break down the information barrier for the chambers that you're going to have to then make meaningful choices about how you go along and complete the mission. The other interesting thing is the way that spells work as well on that probability space. So imagine that I've got a door state which is unknown, I know it could be one of these 3 states. However, my party's not very good at either checking doors, and I don't want to risk going through it. So what I would do potentially is you could cast, the cleric detects trap spell, and where that works is if you were successful in casting the spell, it would set that door to be anything but trapped. So when you were going to try and go through that door, you would only be able to roll a 1 or a 3. You would re-roll a 2. So the 2 states could only be open and locked. That's how you can then use the spells to set determinants on the probability space for open and locked by removing trapped. Because if you cast a detect trap spell successfully, that would identify any traps, which in this case it means there'll be no traps, so it's open and locked. There's a lot more to go on that in future. But ultimately for doors in Chaos Rising, doors are always how much resource will you spend to gain information about the probability space. That is a big part of the game. There's lots of unknowns, and the main part of the game is how many resources will you spend to try and gain that information so you can make decisions on the actions your party will take to make it a proper strategic game. So yeah, that's doors. Thank you very much, and happy gaming.